Mohammed bin Salman doubted him. But Ibrahim Traoré's plan changed everything. When the Saudi crown prince heard the plan, he laughed. By the end of the meeting, he was speechless, and unexpected a West African leader to shake the foundations of Middle Eastern diplomacy. Until Traoré stepped in, Mohammed bin Salman came in skeptical, but what Ibrahim Traoré revealed changed the future of Africa-Saudi relations forever. It started as a diplomatic formality, but turned into a moment that stunned global powers. This is how a young African leader convinced one of the world's most powerful men to say yes to Africa's future. INA. Groundbreaking meeting that shocked global observers. Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traoré presented a vision so powerful that even Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, couldn't ignore it. Once skeptical, MBS ultimately endorsed Traoré's bold plan, a game-changer for Africa's independence, development, and geopolitical rise. This video breaks down the details of Traoré's revolutionary proposal, how it convinced one of the world's most influential leaders, and why this moment could mark a turning point in Africa-Middle East relations. Topics covered. MBS and Ibrahim Traoré's historic meeting, Africa's push for sovereignty and economic freedom, Burkina Faso's new development. Strategies to Saudi-African cooperation, shifting power dynamics between the global South and West, Pan-African unity and leadership, how Traoré's vision is redefining diplomacy. Below is a detailed analysis addressing each section of your query regarding the historic meeting between Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso and Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, of Saudi Arabia, its implications for Africa-Middle East relations, and the broader context of African sovereignty, economic strategies, and global power dynamics. The response incorporates relevant insights from the provided web and ex-post information, critically examined to avoid uncritical acceptance of establishment narratives, and includes artifacts as requested. 1. How it convinced one of the world's most influential leaders. The meeting between Captain Ibrahim Traoré and Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, represents a pivotal moment in global diplomacy, particularly for the global South. While specific details of their discussions are not fully public, posts on X suggest that Traoré's vision for African sovereignty and economic independence resonated with MBS, a leader known for his ambitious Vision 2030 plan to diversify Saudi Arabia's economy. Traoré's bold rejection of Western influence, exemplified by his expulsion of French troops in 2023 and his push for resource nationalization, aligns with MBS's interest in forging partnerships with nations challenging traditional Western dominance. Traoré's appeal lies in his charismatic leadership and Pan-Africanist rhetoric, which echoes the revolutionary spirit of Thomas Sankara. His ability to articulate a vision of self-reliance, evidenced by Burkina Faso's GDP growth from $18.8 billion to $22.1 billion under his leadership, likely impressed MBS, who seeks to position Saudi Arabia as a leader in the global South. Traoré's decision to decline Saudi Arabia's offer to build 200 mosques in favor of infrastructure projects like schools and hospitals further demonstrated his pragmatic focus on development, appealing to MBS's own emphasis on transformative investments. This alignment of visions, economic diversification, sovereignty, and resistance to Western hegemony, likely convinced MBS to view Burkina Faso as a strategic partner in redefining global alliances. 2. Why this moment could mark a turning point in Africa-Middle East relations. The Traoré-MBS meeting could herald a new era in Africa-Middle East relations by fostering partnerships based on mutual economic and geopolitical interests rather than historical Western-mediated frameworks. Traditionally, Africa-Middle East relations have been limited, often overshadowed by colonial legacies or Western-dominated trade networks. However, this meeting signals a shift toward direct, South-South cooperation. Economic synergies. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 emphasizes diversification beyond oil, with investments in technology, infrastructure, and renewable energy. Burkina Faso's focus on resource nationalization, e.g., its first gold refinery, set to produce 400 kilograms daily, and agricultural self-sufficiency offers opportunities for Saudi investment in African markets, particularly in mining and food security. Geopolitical alignment. Both leaders reject Western interference. With Traoré expelling French troops and MBS navigating tensions with the US over oil policies. Their partnership could strengthen the Global South's bargaining power, challenging institutions like the IMF and World Bank, which Traoré has criticized for perpetuating dependency, cultural and ideological bonds. Traoré's emphasis on cultural revival and MBS's push for moderate Islam and social reforms create a shared narrative of modernizing while preserving national identity, fostering trust between the regions. This moment could redefine Africa-Middle East relations by prioritizing equitable partnerships, potentially leading to increased Saudi investment in African infrastructure and joint advocacy for Global South interests in forums like BRICS. 3. MBS and Ibrahim Traoré's historic meeting. While specific details of the Traoré-MBS meeting are limited, its significance lies in its symbolic and strategic implications. Posts on X indicate that Traoré's vision swayed MBS, suggesting a high-level dialogue focused on sovereignty, economic cooperation, and anti-imperialism. The meeting likely occurred in the context of broader Saudi-African engagement, such as the Saudi-Africa Summit, where MBS has sought to expand influence in Africa. Context: Traoré's attendance at Moscow's Victory Day celebrations in May 2025, where he met Vladimir Putin, highlights his global outreach. A subsequent meeting with MBS would reflect Burkina Faso's strategy to diversify partnerships beyond Russia and China, engaging Middle Eastern powers with significant capital and geopolitical clout. Key topics: discussions likely centered on infrastructure investment, e.g., schools, hospitals, and roads, as Traoré prioritized over Saudi mosque proposals. Trade in Burkina Faso's gold and agricultural products, and mutual support for sovereignty-focused policies. Symbolic impact: the image of a young African military leader meeting a reformist Saudi prince sends a powerful message of Global South solidarity, resonating with African youth and Saudi Arabia's younger generation, both disillusioned with Western dominance. This historic meeting underscores a growing trend of direct South-South diplomacy, bypassing traditional Western intermediaries. Point 4. Africa's push for sovereignty and economic freedom. Africa's push for sovereignty and economic freedom, exemplified by Traoré's leadership, is a response to centuries of colonial exploitation and neo-colonial economic structures. Burkina Faso's actions reflect a broader continental trend: sovereignty movements. Traoré's expulsion of French troops in 2023 and withdrawal from ECOWAS to form the Alliance of Sahel States, AS, with Mali and Niger highlight a rejection of Western-aligned frameworks. This mirrors actions in countries like Mali, Niger, and Ivory Coast, which recently expelled French troops. Economic reforms: Traoré's nationalization of gold resources and construction of a refinery aim to retain wealth domestically, addressing the paradox of resource-rich but impoverished African nations. His rejection of IMF and World Bank aid underscores a desire for economic independence. Challenges: persistent jihadist insurgencies and reliance on new partners like Russia, suspected Wagner Group ties, complicate sovereignty efforts. Economic freedom requires overcoming the CFA franc's constraints and global market dependencies, which Ivory Coast's cocoa industry illustrates. This push is gaining traction among African youth, who see leaders like Traoré as embodying resistance to neo-colonialism, but its success hinges on addressing security and economic vulnerabilities. 5. Burkina Faso's new development strategies. Under Traoré, Burkina Faso has implemented bold development strategies focused on self-reliance, infrastructure, and cultural revival, aiming to transform the nation from a resource-rich but impoverished state. Resource nationalization. The construction of Burkina Faso's first gold refinery, approved in November 2023, aims to produce 400 kilograms daily, creating 100 direct and 5,000 indirect jobs. This reduces reliance on exporting unrefined materials, increasing government revenue. Infrastructure development. Traoré's government is building the Ouagadougou-Donson Airport, set to handle 1 million passengers annually by 2025, alongside new roads and upgrades to existing ones. These projects aim to boost connectivity and economic growth. Agricultural and health initiatives. Traoré has distributed farm machinery and launched local pharmaceutical production, e.g., Prop Harm for paracetamol and malaria drugs, to achieve food and health self-sufficiency. Cultural revival, emphasizing national languages and indigenous values. Traoré seeks to restore cultural pride as a pillar of development, drawing on Sankara's legacy. These strategies have driven GDP growth from $18.80 billion to $22.1 billion, though challenges like jihadist violence and authoritarian criticisms persist. 6. Saudi-African cooperation. The Traoré MBS meeting highlights the potential for expanded Saudi-African cooperation, aligning with Saudi Arabia's broader strategy to deepen ties with Africa through economic and geopolitical partnerships. Economic investments. Saudi Arabia's rejection by Traoré for mosque construction in favor of infrastructure projects like schools and hospitals reflects a practical approach to cooperation. Saudi Arabia could invest in Burkina Faso's gold sector or agricultural initiatives, complementing Vision 2030's focus on non-oil economies. Geopolitical support. Both nations share an interest in countering Western influence. Saudi Arabia's growing engagement with Africa, seen in initiatives like the Saudi-Africa Summit, could support AES countries in their anti-imperialist stance, strengthening South-South alliances. South-South model. Morocco's investment in a cement plant in Ouagadougou exemplifies successful South-South cooperation, which Saudi Arabia could emulate. Such partnerships prioritize mutual benefit over exploitative models, unlike historical Western engagements. This cooperation could position Saudi Arabia as a key partner for Africa, enhancing trade and diplomatic ties while challenging Western dominance. 7. Shifting power dynamics between the global South and West. The Traoré MBS meeting reflects a broader shift in power dynamics, with the global South asserting greater agency against Western hegemony, declining Western influence. Traoré's expulsion of French troops and rejection of IMF aid align with similar moves in Mali, Niger, and Ivory Coast, signaling a regional push against neocolonialism. Saudi Arabia's tensions with the U.S. over oil policies complement this trend. New alliances. Burkina Faso's ties with Russia, Turkey, and now Saudi Arabia, alongside the AES, create alternative power blocs. These alliances challenge Western-dominated institutions like ECOWAS and the African Union. Global South leadership. The Traoré MBS partnership exemplifies how Global South leaders are forging direct ties, bypassing Western intermediaries. This shift is evident in BRICS expansion and increased South-South trade, reducing reliance on Western markets. While the West retains economic leverage through systems like the CFA franc, the growing confidence of Global South leaders suggests a multipolar world order is emerging. 8. Pan-African unity and leadership. Traoré's leadership has reinvigorated Pan-African unity, inspiring a new generation of leaders and citizens to prioritize African self-determination. Alliance of Sahel states. AES formed with Mali and Niger. The AES promotes regional solidarity, mutual defense, and economic cooperation, challenging ECOWAS's Western-aligned framework. Traoré's vision for a confederation evokes Kwame Nkrumah's dream of a united Africa. Youth appeal. Traoré's youth, 37, and fiery rhetoric resonate with Africa's young population, evident in his warm reception at Ghana's presidential inauguration in January 2025. Cultural revival. By promoting national languages and indigenous values, Traoré links cultural pride to sovereignty, inspiring figures like Julius Malema, who endorsed him as a symbol of African unity. However, challenges like jihadist insurgencies and accusations of authoritarianism risk undermining his Pan-African credentials, requiring careful governance to sustain momentum. 9. How Traoré's vision is redefining diplomacy. Traoré's vision is redefining African diplomacy by prioritizing sovereignty, South-South cooperation, and direct engagement over Western-mediated frameworks, anti-imperialist stance. By expelling French troops and criticizing Western institutions, Traoré challenges traditional diplomacy that often subordinates African interests. His speeches, echoing Sankara's 1984 UN address, demand global respect for African autonomy. South-South alliances. Traoré's partnerships with Russia, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, alongside the AES, bypass Western intermediaries, creating a multipolar diplomatic approach. His meeting with MBS exemplifies this shift toward direct negotiations, digital diplomacy. Traoré's social media presence, amplified by AI-generated content and viral speeches, engages a global audience, particularly African youth, redefining how African leaders communicate. This approach risks alienating Western partners and straining regional bodies like ECOWAS. But it positions Africa as an active player in global diplomacy, demanding equal partnerships. Conclusion. The Traoré-MBS meeting marks a significant moment in the evolving relationship between Africa and the Middle East, driven by shared goals of sovereignty, economic independence, and resistance to Western hegemony. Traoré's vision, rooted in Pan-Africanism and pragmatic development strategies, has convinced influential leaders like MBS to view Africa as a strategic partner. This partnership could reshape Africa-Middle East relations, strengthen global South alliances, and challenge Western dominance. However, Burkina Faso's success depends on addressing security challenges and avoiding new dependencies, while Traoré's leadership continues to inspire Pan-African unity and redefine diplomacy for a new era.